It takes trust to implement pleasure denial and edging, right? This is something to understand. It takes patience. You have to have patience. And you have to have a predatorial mind state to really act on edging. Edging is something that it takes patience. It takes discipline, right? And for the other person, it takes trust. If a person doesn't trust that you will adequately meet their needs, right, their sexual needs, that you will be able to capitalize on the arousal that they're experiencing before they burn out, or that you can maintain and sustain the little minor details of the seductive things you're doing to raise up their arousal and to keep it there for that period of time, then they're going to lack the patience and the trust to allow you to be in control of their pleasure and to implement pleasure denial when it comes to pleasure denial, edging, those different things. Like, that's really one of my, this is one of my specialties, right? I love to edge. But the main thing about edging is this. You have to get a person aroused. You have to keep them aroused. You have to get them close enough to where they're near the edge, and you have to keep them there, right? If a person loses their arousal before you turn it up, then you're pretty much going to have to start all the way back over. So just arousal itself is an important thing, but it's not just how you look, it's the energy of the matter. It's your fixation on that person's pleasure. The ego gratification and the validation that you're going to take out of the pleasure that they experience is something that is your primary focus in that moment, right? Like, to be dominant is to be the primary giver of pleasure, the primary receiver of control. See, dominance isn't always about fucking somebody hard or going hard or being rough or being fast. Oftentimes, it's a mindset that comes with sexual dominance, right? And that mindset is, I am in control, and I want this person to enjoy giving control to me because I'm going to deny their pleasure in a way that's going to increase the level of pleasure and desire they're going to experience, so that when they finally do experience it, it's going to feel much better, right? Now, it takes trust to do that, and it takes desire to do that. Because think about it like this. You know, a lot of dom-sub dynamics I learned from being a nice guy. You know, in my years being a nice guy, you know, being the type of guy who's, you know, pursuing a woman and all that different type of shit. During that period of time, there'd be instances where I would text a woman, right? And then I'm like, okay, I don't like, and you wait for her to text you back. And then when she finally texts you back, you might get a little bit upset, a little frustrated in between there. But when she finally texts you back, now you're excited that you finally received that pleasure of that communication, that validation, whatever it is. Edging and pleasure denial can work in a similar way, right? Now, best case scenario is that the person doesn't know when exactly it's going to happen. And the longer you sustain desire, the better it's going to be. The longer you sustain arousal, the better it's going to be. Like, let's say you're on a couch, right? Or let's say you're on a couch with a woman. This is a scenario I've had. I was dealing with a woman before. We're in a relationship a long time, right? You know, I got a foot fetish. So she would like use her feet and, you know, while we're laying down and, you know, tease me with it through my clothes. That'll get me turned on, you know. You get some of that, you know, what do you call it? I forgot what the name of it is. Pre-cum and shit like that. Now, if she maintained that for a period of time and got me aroused, got me in the zone, and then just stopped and then waited a few minutes and then did it, then by then I might just be out the mood. But if she knew how to transition into the acts that were going to transpire without me losing arousal first, then it would be much more effective. And in those instances would be some great pleasure, even from simple things like maybe a hand job, maybe a foot job. It could be anything, right? And sometimes it's not even about the act that's taking place, but it's about elevating the person's arousal level, having the patience, having the discipline, but also having the observance. And oftentimes it's a passive observance, right? It's where you're feeling their energy, you're feeling their arousal level. You're not just looking at them directly. You can sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But there's different things that go along with pleasure, denial, and edging. It takes patience, it takes discipline. And by doing that, you can train somebody to not feel like they always want exactly what they want when they want it. I'll give some more examples. And this is kind of where the primer principle comes from. It's a lot of edging and pleasure denial. For some women, if they are in their dominant ego themselves, where what they desire is to feel sexy, to feel potent, and all these different type of things, but they're like a feminine dominant in a way, to where they're emotional and they don't really aren't able to do it regardless of how they feel, like they're real antsy and angsty, then oftentimes they won't be able to handle pleasure denial, right? Because even if you do exactly what you say you're going to do, they're going to be hurt because of it. Their ego is going to be hurt. They're going to be frustrated because they aren't getting exactly what they want when they want, and then they no longer care about the higher level of pleasure that comes from the anticipation of desire. Right? Like let's say you're dealing with a woman who has a fluctuating libido. It kind of goes up, it goes down. If you know that you can get it when you want to, right? Or if you know that at the end of the night, it's going to be, y'all gonna get it in, y'all gonna have a good time, the energy is gonna be there. Then when you go through that process, you might see her, maybe you don't see her every day, you see her, and then you can flirt with each other all day. You can tease each other all day. But at the end of the night, you know it's going down. Now, if you're dealing with a woman who has a fluctuating libido, then you can kind of get impatient and say, okay, I gotta capitalize on it as soon as I see her. Because if I don't capitalize on it as soon as I see her, it can put me in a situation where by the end of the night, my needs may go unmet. And the more you are disillusioned, or the more hope deferred makes the heart grow sick, you lose the ability to wait. Another thing that kills the ability to go through pleasure denial and edging sometimes is a lack of a high level of arousal in the first place, right? So if the arousal level isn't high enough, and one thing I say is for me, just for me personally, the baseline level of how aroused I'm going to be is going to be set before my clothes come off, before the slab comes out. That's a mental thing. So if it comes out, no matter how good the head is, right? No matter how good it is, just because it's good doesn't mean I'm automatically going to nut fast. It might take a while. But if I'm very aroused before it starts, then it might still take a while, but not because it has to, but because of the desire. See, trying to force somebody just to do it fast isn't the edging. It isn't the pleasure denial, right? Because you have to understand that there are levels to this. Like when you first start having sex or engaging in sexual activities, at first it may be a matter of you just want to be able to make them do it at all, right? And after you make sure they can do it at all, then you want them to be able to do it consistently or be able to control when it happens, right? So after that, you want them to be able to do it quickly, right? After you're able to control and find ways for them to do it quickly, that's when you then take the control of being able to make things last longer. So when they would get close, you might slow it down, or you might just start orbiting, which is getting off of the direct stimulation on the erogenous zone and then go and orbit around that area and slow it down, use less pressure, all these different techniques. After you do this for a period of time, they may get so close that you might continue to go fast. Like when they get too close and they're about to go, you might say, fuck it, I'm about to go ahead and knock them out the park. And then it's like, all right, they're going to come super hard, body shaking all over the place, right? Or you can just keep it really, really slow. Now, you have to keep in mind that you have to ask questions and get feedback and see where a person is, because you can make somebody come from something slow, but not everybody, right? It's about the mental space that you're in when these particular acts are taking place. And it's just like when I was having my conversations about, and I haven't posted this yet, I have to post it, but just certain conversations about the masculine submissive and how that can lead to a lack of sexual compatibility at times. Because if you're taking a passive role, but you haven't established your sexual dominance, your sexual discipline, your patience, your ability to be a predator, the consistency and the sustainability of your own desire to engage, if you aren't taking initiative or doing the things that arouse that person adequately, seducing them, then when you want someone to just feel a certain way about you just because you're there, it can hurt their ego, right? Or not just hurt their ego, but it kind of cancels out because neither one of you are fully taking control, but neither one of you are fully tapping into pleasure. The thing about edging and pleasure denial is that that's a dominant thing, right? It's a dominant thing because you're the primary giver of pleasure, the primary receiver of control. But once you understand this, you can use this in a variety of ways. And you can stretch it out too. I've done it over a period of multiple days, but it takes time, right? It takes skill. It takes nuance to these experiences to know how to do it. Like, something I've done with multiple women is I would, be dealing with them. I'll have them come through, give some head. I don't even touch them. Might even have them spend some money too, because the investment that you make is something that puts you in a position where the investment increases your desire for the pleasure. That's a little bit of the transactional. Not completely, but a little bit. They still have to feel somewhat desirable. But I'll tell a woman to her face, dick ain't free. But through that investment that she makes, have her suck dick one day, right? Maybe 2 days later, have her do it again. And then the next day I'll put it in her, right? Next day I'll slide in. See, that's the primer principle, right? Especially if you're talking to her and you give her a little bit of, you paint a picture for her, she can open up a new different type of orgasm. I've dealt with women before where when I was using this particular method, they would get close to or damn near at the point of, they'll tell me afterwards, like, when I sucked your dick, it felt like I was having sex. Because once you reach a very high level of arousal, more erogenous zones become activated, more spots become activated. The pleasure becomes something to where your body is trying to cope with the fact that you're not receiving direct stimulation to certain spots. So when you're highly aroused and you feel validated by what you're doing and it turns you on, the spots that aren't even directly viewed or generally viewed as erogenous zones become zones that become sexually arousing. So a woman can have orgasms from sucking dick, a woman can have orgasms from a foot rub, getting a toe suck, regardless of what it is. It's a lot of different things that go along with this. There's a lot of things that go along with it. So, just giving a little bit of a breakdown on pleasure denial and edging. When we understand these different aspects of it, these are things that can work. And I'll say this right here. For older men who are dealing with a younger woman, if she's feminine submissive, not feminine dominant, but if she's a feminine submissive woman and you're dealing with a younger woman, especially if you're older, your libido slows down. By understanding pleasure denial, you don't have to have sex with her as often, because how explosive it is when you have sex with her, when you do have sex with her, it's going to be more appealing. Another thing is this. If you create a system by which the highest level of pleasure she receives is through your penis, then instead of having to use your penis to meet that sex drive all the time, you can just give her the fingers, give her the head, use toys. But that doesn't quite scratch the itch the same as your dick, because there's a certain attachment to your penis, because not only does she receive pleasure, but she also receives validation through the pleasure that she experiences, right? So she receives pleasure and validation from the pleasure that you experience. That's something that's pretty much, not 100%, but mostly exclusive to penetrative sex, right? Where the penis and the vagina, or the penis and the ass, is something that both receive pleasure from the same exact act, the same exact strokes at the same exact time, right? But it's different things that go along with it. So when you understand these different aspects of arousal and validation and pleasure denial and edging and all these different aspects like dom-sub dynamics, is something that can be greatly fulfilling to your sex life. Greatly fulfilling. And it's something that can bypass looks. Not 100% bypass looks, but sometimes people feel insecure because they're having sex with somebody, they're not coming that fast, or they're not coming at all, or they don't, or they don't come that often, or it's not multiples. Oftentimes, it's because there is a lack of arousal that comes ahead of time. And understand that foreplay itself is not the same as creating arousal, creating desire, creating anticipation. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I remember when I was younger, I used to focus a lot on foreplay. But if a woman isn't focusing on her own pleasure, then when you're implementing foreplay, then sometimes what can happen is that you can eat a woman's pussy till she comes, and she's still not aroused enough or adequately prepared to be penetrated, because that's the focal point of her sexual pleasure. Right? When that's the focal point of her sexual pleasure, she's gotten the peak of what she wants out of it. So now she's just waiting for you to have sex so you can get your nut off and get it over with. So some of what I'm talking about here, sometimes when it comes to how I look at dom-sub dynamics and creating your primary role of being the dominant, and a woman has her primary role of being submissive, it kind of flips the dynamic. But from a stance of understanding that the man is going to have a little bit of an easier time with being masculine, a little bit of an easier time typically with being consistent in his sex drive, consistent in his ability to receive orgasm. So it's just more so when you have sex, the woman focuses on her own pleasure. But when she wants to receive the validation of giving pleasure, she does that through giving head. That's kind of how most women do with sex, where when they're having sex with a man, they're trying to give the man pussy, right? They want him to get his nut off through having sex. But then when she wants to get her nut off, she's either going to be, go DJ, that my DJ. They're going to be, scratching the record, and then, or getting some head to get her nut off. But then when she's actually having sex, she's more so just focused on, well, it feels kind of good, but I just want him to get his off because that's going to make her feel good. To tap into subspace, you have to get out of that mind state of wanting to feel sexually dominant, because you want to get into the zone. That zone is going to be in a certain space where it may not be immediate. So you got to understand that when somebody's in that dominant headspace, it may take a while, right? They're in there for a while, especially as a man. I like having sex for extended periods of time, like when I'm really getting into it. But if a woman feels like insecure because I did nut in 5-10 minutes, then it's going to make it very difficult for her to enjoy sex with me, or to even be able to experience the things that I can't bring to her. So this is Coach Brody, some general sex talk. I'm out.